Hi there, it's Mrs. Scarple, and we, in our previous lesson, were finding the slope between 2 points from a graph, from a table, and from 2 points. We're going to take that information today, and we're going to start writing equations in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. The m is where we write our slope. The b is where we write our y-intercept. And the y-intercept is where we find that our graph crosses the y-axis. Now, anytime a graph crosses a y-axis, anytime a line crosses a y-axis, the x value is 0. The y value will be the b. So, for example, we have a slope of 3 and a y-intercept of 0, -1. So if we want to write an equation for this information in slope-intercept form, we would have y equals 3x minus 1. Now you might be asking, what happened to the plus sign? Well, I could have written y equals 3x plus a -1, but that's considered to be a little messy looking in math. Anytime you have a plus negative, you can always just write it as a minus. So if we take a look at this next example, we have a slope of 1/2 and a y-intercept of 0, 0. Now, keeping in mind that with the y-intercept, the x is always 0, the y value is always the b in the equation. So when we write our equation, it's going to be y equals 1/2 x plus 0. But we don't even really need to write plus 0 because adding 0 to anything doesn't change the value. We can just write y equals 1/2 x. So from a graph, we can identify the y-intercept because it's where it crosses the y-axis. So this is our y-intercept. And we can use rise over run to find our slope. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm counting spaces because that gives me a more accurate count. Plus 4, plus 4. So my slope is 4 over 4, which simplifies to 1. I have my slope, I have my y-intercept. I can write my equation in slope-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. So my equation is y equals 1x. It'd be a plus -2 or just -2. And again, when you have a 1 in front of a variable, you could just write it as x minus 2. If we take a look at the graph on the right, we have a y-intercept at 0, -1. To find our slope, I tend to go from my left point to my right point, so I'm going to do down 1, right 3. So my slope, my rise was -1, my run was 3. I can't simplify that. I have a y-intercept of 0, -1. I can write my equation. Y equals -1/3 x minus 1. If you're given tables, you can still write the equation in slope-intercept form from a table. So we know to find our slopes, we need to find our change in our x and our change in our y, and it should be consistent. So if I look at my x values, they're decreasing by 4, and if I look at my y values, they're decreasing by 2. Now my slope, rise over run, that's a change in y over a change in x. So let's be careful here. My change in y is -2. My change in x is -4. And when I simplify that, I have 1/2. My y-intercept is whenever x is 0. So this pair, this xy pair, represents my y-intercept. So again, I can write my equation because I have my slope, I've identified the y-intercept. I have y equals 1/2 x minus 2. Let's take a look at the table on the right. If we find how x is changing, x keeps getting smaller, so it's decreasing by 3. If we look at the y values, it gets larger by 2. So our slope, which is a change in the y value over a change in the x value, +2 over -3. Now, when I look at my table, I see that I have 2 zeros in it. Remember, for y-intercept, you're looking for when x is 0. So here's my pair where x is 0. This is my y-intercept. And I can write my equation. Y equals -2/3 x minus 4. So what about when we have 2 points? Well, I still need to find my slope. So I still need that change in y over change in x. So I'm going to identify my points as x1, y1, x2, y2, so that when I find my change in y, I'm going to subtract my y's. That's 9 minus -6 over, subtract my x's, 3 minus 0. Subtracting a negative is 9 plus 6. And 3 minus 0 is 3. So we have 9 plus 6 is 15 over 3 is a slope of 5. And if we look at our 2 points, only one of them has a 0. So that means the b value is my -6. And my equation is y equals 5x minus 6. And I'm going to do the same thing with the second example. To find my slope, I want the change in y over the change in x. So I'm going to label my points. Find the change in my y values, so 2 subtract -1 over 0 subtract 4. 2 subtract negative 1 becomes 2 plus 1. 0 subtract 4 is negative 4. 2 plus 1 is 3 over negative 4. And I need to identify the point that would be the x-intercept. That means the 2 would be the b value. And we have y equals negative 3/4 x plus, because the b value is positive, 2. And we can even do this in application problems. So in 2000, the average cost for college tuition in the United States was about $14,000. In 2010, the cost was about $18,000. Write a linear model that represents the cost of tuition as a function of the number of years since 2000. So we're basically, our slope, if we think about this as an application, our slope is representing a rate. And we don't usually say year per cost, we say cost per year. So our slope is going to represent the cost per year. So we want to find the change in the cost. So the two cost values we have are 18,000 and 14,000. So 18,000 subtract 14,000. The number of years since 2000, so we're going 2010 subtract 2,000, and this will get us our slope. So we have 18,000 minus 14,000 is 4,000. 2010 minus 2,000 is 10. And if we simplify that, we have a slope of 400. So that would be defined as being $400 per year was the increase. The y-intercept is going to be the starting value. What was the cost of tuition to start with? In this scenario, we were starting with 14,000. So now we have the two values that we need to write an equation in slope-intercept form. So y equals, our slope is 400, x plus our y-intercept is 14,000. And that's our equation. Sometimes we don't even need to do that much work. If we look at this example, we have Jack and Jill are filling up their water tank. The tank holds a maximum of 55 gallons. At 8 a.m., the tank had 28 gallons of water. Jack and Jill add water to the tank at a rate of 2.6 gallons of water per hour. Write a linear model that represents the number of gallons of water in the tank as a function of the number of hours since 8 a.m. So 8 a.m. is when we start. And we know that we start with 28 gallons. That gives us our y-intercept. We're also given a rate. we have a rate that is equal to 2.6 gallons per hour. That's our slope. Anytime you have rate, that's going to be your slope. So we have y-intercept, we have slope without having to do any calculating. We can write an equation in y equals mx plus b form. So y equals 2.6 x plus 28. So we can use information from application problems to help us write equations in slope-intercept form as well.